Welcome to the Butler Beat. I'm Scott Bridge. The College of Communication at Butler University is hosting its CCOM Symposium on Servant Leadership. An impressive array of speakers from around the country is at Butler to talk about servant leadership and how that concept has impacted their lives. One of those speakers is my guest today. Jill Geisler is the author of Work Happy: What Great Bosses Know. She also does a podcast, What Great Bosses Know, which is a popular download on iTunes. Jill's background is in television news. She spent 25 years at a Milwaukee TV station, rising to Vice President of News at that station. Today, Jill has a thriving consultancy that helps people become effective leaders. Jill, welcome to the Butler Beat.
Good to be here.
Do you need to be a boss to be a good leader?
Absolutely not. What I tell managers that I work with is, according to the rules, people are required to follow managers. They choose to follow leaders. And why do they choose to follow leaders? It's usually because of their expertise, their empathy, and their integrity. And if you possess that, no matter what role you hold in an organization, and if you really believe in your expertise, integrity, and empathy, all three, people will choose to follow you.
How difficult is it, though, to be a leader when you have a boss at the same time?
Well, I think that most people who end up being managers probably gave off some evidence, I hope, that they have the capacity to lead. Not always. Sometimes people are promoted to management because they're very, very good at their craft. And then it's assumed, well, if you were the smartest carpenter, you should lead the other carpenters, or journalists, you should lead the others. And it's a really an entirely different skill set. So one hopes that your boss is in fact a leader, and that means that as a leader, your boss will appreciate the kinds of things that you'll do to influence other people. In any organization, I think of newsrooms, and there are people who are informal leaders. If your anchors are people who are not only competent at delivering the news, but they really look at the entire team as a group that they could help coach, help make ethical decisions, bring up as good writers, then they are using the power they have as anchors to lead. They don't run the newsroom, but they have influence. I do, for the last, oh my goodness, through the Poynter Institute, where I was on faculty for 16 years after I finished my newsroom career, we did a leadership seminar for TV news anchors. I still do it. And that was the biggest thing, is to take the authority that they had, the informal authority, and really use it for good. And you don't have to be an anchor. You lead from where you are. I've been doing training at National Public Radio, and they really believe at NPR in investing in emerging leaders. And I asked them, how do you identify them? Well, they are people who think beyond themselves, who are looking at not just problems, but solutions. They're people who others trust, instinctively trust, not just because they keep secrets, but because of their work ethic, because of the way that they frame things, sometimes because they're just optimistic. And all of those things, if you have a boss who is a leader, it will inspire you to be a leader. If you have a boss who is trying to manage you and have you fit just a very narrow role, you'll have to be a guerrilla leader. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Now, but the concept of leading by example, is that, it doesn't seem like it's enough.
Well, it isn't enough, because if you lead by example by being a really good general assignment reporter, all you're really doing is showing people how to be good in craft. You have to be looking around on either side of you and saying, how well am I known, what am I known for as a colleague? Do I appear and do I genuinely care as much about the needs of the producer or the needs of the photographer? Have I taken the time to make their jobs easier or to be an advocate for something that makes sense? If I'm a general assignment reporter, am I coming with ideas to the meeting, or am I waiting for people to hand me the assignment? If there's a tough ethical situation, am I waiting for the boss to tell us what to do, or am I offering a perspective myself? All of those things that you're doing are really sending out signals that you are invested in helping lead others, not in just having power. raw power, getting your way and making sure your idea, it wins. It's about critical thinking, it's about collaboration, and it's about taking care of other people.
Mm-hmm. But how are you a good leader without threatening the egos of the people who perhaps are above you in the food chain?
I guess, again, the most important thing leaders do is help other people succeed.
Okay.
So if you start with that, unless your boss is problematic, and there are many bosses who are, I don't think it's the overwhelming number, but there are some who are, but unless that person is problematic, when you lead, you're helping your boss succeed. The biggest thing I will tell you is coming in with solutions instead of just problems. There are two things that I think I know from my own personal experience of how I ended up going from being part of the team to leading the team. And that was, number one, I volunteered for things, even though there was no immediate payoff to that volunteering. You know, you didn't get anything for it. It just seemed like the right thing to do. And the second thing was, if you see a problem and you're going to go to your boss with it, you had better come not only with a description, an accurate, well-researched description of the problem, but then a suggested solution that included a little skin in the game. So that if you're saying, we have a terrible filing system here or an archiving system for video and we're just sick of it, well, that's whining. But coming in and saying, I've checked in a couple of other markets, here's what they do, and I'd be willing to be on a committee if you wanted to take a look at it. What happens? You make it easy for your manager to say yes.
How do you know when you're a good leader?
You turn around and see if there's anybody behind you. And honestly, one of the things that I tell a lot of managers that I work with from news organizations is there's a day that will come when the joy you used to get in that story that you produced, you know, seeing it on the air, seeing it in print, and you just, that was mine, that's my byline. You'll get that same joy, that thrill when you see that it's somebody else who's done it, and it's someone that you may have coached, someone you may have even had to have a tough conversation with, you know, saying, this wasn't working right, but you can do this. You'll get that thrill. And I think that's the other time you know that you're a leader, is when you start getting as great a satisfaction out of other people's success as you did out of the individual product that you were responsible for.
How did your experiences in a TV newsroom lead you to where you are today?
Well, first of all, I will tell you that the best preparation for a TV newsroom leadership was being an RA in the dorms when I was
Really?
when I was at UW-Madison. Well, I will say that because we called them house fellows there, and because we're on campus talking about it, I think it's really important to say this, because you begin to recognize that each person came from a different family, a different upbringing. Your job was to enforce to the best of your ability some rules and guidelines that you had, but to help people grow. Their academic experience, their social experience, their interactions on the floor were all really your responsibility in some way to at least facilitate. And I found that that was a tremendous preparation for recognizing that every person is an individual and you need to know how to reach each person. So in a television newsroom, the things that prepare you for the next phase of your life, I think, understanding of deadlines, critical thinking, relationships internally and externally. You know, people in broadcast, I think, understood sooner than people in print about the importance of a relationship with the audience because everybody knew your face, right? In print, they just knew the stories. I think it was the reason that for many years, and still now, people when they do credibility surveys will say that they find local news to be more credible. Is it because it is more higher quality? I don't think that's the argument. It's just that I feel like I know this person. So today, when interactivity is a part of our digital world and people put in comments or they expect to have an interaction with the people who produce news, television was better prepared for that. And I think that preparation has helped me as an instructor now in newsrooms, helping managers and helping people change cultures. Because you've seen a massive transformation now in newsroom cultures.
Let's talk about that interactivity for a moment and how it impacts leadership, because everything, or I shouldn't say everything, but many things are done by email or text. And there's less, it seems like there is less face-to-face interaction. Right. So how does that impact leadership then?
Well, and it can impact it very negatively.
Yeah.
I will sometimes work with a group and say, imagine if I've sent you an email and it says, and you're the boss, right? And I work for you. Hi, Scott, because we are on a first name basis.
Of course.
Hi, Scott. What did you think of the game this weekend? I thought it was insanely wonderful, that last-minute buzzer beater. By the way, I'm wondering if I could swap days off next week with Mary. It's okay with her if it's okay with you. And you're very busy, so you send me a reply. The one-word reply, fine. And I will ask a group of people in my seminars, give me 4 different ways you could read the word fine. Would you do that for me, Scott?
One way would be, oh, they're not real crazy about this idea.
Why?
I'm imagining how they are saying it.
Right.
Fine.
Exactly. I wrote you along. By the law of proportionality, I talked about the game, I was friendly, you wrote one word. And because you're a powerful person, you're just being efficient, I look at that and say, what's wrong? When all you were saying was, fine.
Yeah.
And so when you are a leader, it is really important for you to double check the quality of your communication. Send out an email, leave one person off when you're thanking the team, and that person is going to presume it wasn't an accident. It was something you intended to do. And that's why face-to-face communication whenever you can, especially for anything negative, is the most important. And too many people rely on email. There are people who sit next to each other in newsrooms who instant message each other. Okay?
Yes.
I mean, and we've talked about it at our seminars, you know, at Poynter. It's not necessary.
Now, so you've risen up through the ranks and you finally are the boss. How does a leadership style differ from being a boss and have in the lower level versus then being the boss, like you were as being vice president?
Well, especially when you have 100 people in your newsroom. You know, I think the really important thing is it's not just how you individually lead, but it is what kind of a management team do you put together. You should all share the same core values, but you should make certain that you're not hiring clones of yourself, especially on your management team. You want people who have skills that are different than yours, values that are consistent, but skills that are different. You might not be the detail person. You might not be the tech-oriented person. You might not even be a warm people person. Then you better figure out how you are going to put a team together that in total will take care of the needs of the entire organization. And you want to make certain that the way the members of that team treat people, however, isn't something that's up and down. It is consistent with the values that you have. But then the other thing is, the higher up you go in an organization, the more responsible you are for letting other people run the day-to-day and not doing what you used to love, which is just to get in there in the mix and get your hands on the copy and, you know, micromanage those stories, because that's always the fun part. The planning ahead, the external relationships, all of those things, the budgeting, are less fun. So you have to hire really good people for the front lines, but never lose touch one-on-one with the people in the organization. And I think that's another secret. How do you keep an open door when you don't want your managers to feel like people are doing an end run around them? And a lot of that has to do with setting an expectation with everyone in the room. My door is always open, and when you talk to me, the first thing, if you were the assistant news director and I'm the news director, when the person comes to me, I'm going to ask this question: and what did Scott say when you talk with him about it? Because they will know automatically that this isn't about going to the Supreme Court when you haven't really dealt with it at the right level, and that works. And then Scott never has to worry if he sees somebody sitting in my office and talking with me, because it's not, I'm never going to undo something that you've done. unless it involves another conversation later in which I say, let's talk about what I just heard here. What do you think we can do about it?
Are there exercises, or maybe exercises is not the right word, things that people can do to prepare themselves to be, or to help transform themselves into being good leaders?
You know, I try to keep things really simple. When I was thinking about how to make sure that we remove barriers to collaboration, for example, which is a huge issue, especially in newsrooms today where we've built up a digital side, and in some cases, the folks on the digital side started out feeling like servants to everybody else, and then when digital started to get really important, then the people in the rest of the newsroom started to take their duties away from them and started to try to, run things because it got to be cool. And when I think about that idea of collaboration, how do you break barriers? Because that's a leadership issue. You look at distance, how well do I communicate across distance with people, not using email all the time. When I was a news director, I made sure that the photographers' mailboxes were near my office because my station, like many television stations that still were constructed in the time of film, had the photographers off in the back somewhere where the chemicals were kept, and it was an OSHA rule, right? Which means that the path to having them in the newsroom, it actually discouraged it. So we missed all of their ideas. You'd say come to the meetings and things, but all their lockers and everything else were in a different part of the building. Put the mailboxes there, put the coffee pot there. Those are leadership ideas, right? So you try to close distance. You have to look at dominance. Where in your organization are there some assumptions that some people are more important than others, or some people serve others? Whether you're a leader or formally as a manager or informally, how do you break down those barriers? Another one is dissonance, which is how do you make sure that while I'm telling everybody things like, I need you to file for the web, and I need you to help out other people, that I've also given you 17 other duties that keep you from doing all of those things. So I'm giving you conflicting messages. So I've got to make sure I'm not doing that. And then the fourth is discomfort. I don't oftentimes work well with others because I don't even know what you do, I think about over the years, there were photographers. Weren't there photographers that you knew of who liked to work with some people better than others? And it wasn't just because they were good reporters. It was because they understood what it took to do the photographer's job. And they didn't get in their way. And so whether you're a manager or whether you're a leader in training, understanding how to break the barriers to collaboration is a great way to prepare.
At what point in your career did you think to yourself, I'm learning things that I could be helping other people to learn when it comes to leadership?
That's a really good question. I remember a time when it really, I thought about this because our station, or our city, had been targeted for a summer of abortion protests. And it was an organized group that would come to certain cities. And when we knew that that announcement had been made, we knew that there were a lot of ethical decisions that we'd be facing then. And I called together a group of people in the newsroom and said, let's start to make a list of all the ethical challenges we may have. And our list turned out to be, what's the nomenclature we'd use? How would we handle crowd estimates? Because that's always contentious. What would we do about very graphic signs that people were holding? How would we make sure that our presence with a live camera didn't change the behavior of people who were there to protest? Were we causing them to act because the camera was live, and how would we handle that? How would we deal with children who were protesting and arrested? How would we deal with patients who were walking into clinics and in the middle of this? And all of those were issues and questions that we broke up into small groups and came up with what we said our answers were, and we set our own guidelines. We set up like a 3-page sheet of guidelines for our own internal use. And that became something so interesting to people at other television stations and at the Poynter Institute that they asked me to come and teach about that. And it was then that the light bulb kind of went on that I guess those things don't always happen in newsrooms, or at least not that systematically. And deconstructing how decisions are made, how cultures are built, how mistakes happen, that became just fascinating to me, just like you deconstruct how a good story is told. And so that, I guess, is when I started to realize that if I was asked to teach the backstory of how we did that, then there was really something exciting about teaching that. It was a sense of discovery for myself.
You can tell you enjoy what you do.
I really do. I love working with leaders, especially emerging leaders.
Oh, very exciting. If you would, the book is called Work Happy, What Great Bosses Know, and our guest today on the Butler Beat for the CCOM Symposium on Servant Leadership has been Jill Geisler. She is one of the featured speakers here at Butler University during the CCOM Symposium. Thank you very much. I'm Scott Bridge, and you're watching the Butler Beat.